Hey, good evening, everybody. I appreciate y'all spending the time with me. I'm Justin Turner. I'm running for District 4 City Council, and I've got my puppy Zoe, and she has a lot to say about St. George. So the topic that we're going to cover tonight is kind of a little bit deeper dive into the HRC. We're going to talk about some of the things that I've been hearing about it as far as like setting term limits, raising taxes, and some of the initiatives and referendums and things of that nature. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to my producer, Maurice, to kind of explain and give some instructions on how it's going to work.
Hey, thanks, Justin. Everybody, to ask questions, click on the Q&A section of Zoom. Ask your question there. We'll feed them over to Justin. We'll have a question and answer session around 9 minutes after Justin starts talking here in a few seconds. And then for the afterwards, we're going to have open mic and likewise use the Q&A to let us know you want to speak, that you want to interact with Justin, or click into the actions button in Zoom and then click on raise hand, and we'll try to do it on a first come, first served basis to who raises their hands first. All right, without much further delay, let's go ahead and go back to what you're going to discuss. The microphone's yours. Back to you, Justin.
All right. So kind of the first thing I wanted to talk about is term limits, and that's one of the things that I've kind of heard a few times is one of the benefits of the HRC. So under the Lorison Act, there are certain guidelines and things of that nature that a city is able to do. And one of those things is actually setting term limits. So there is an opinion that has been provided by the Attorney General. It is citation 00158, and it's talking about a specific situation for, I believe it's the city of Harahan. And kind of what happened with that is they submitted a resolute to set term limits that actually got voted in by the population, and it became effective before there was actually a constitutional amendment to change the Lorison Act. And the opinion that has been provided by the Attorney General is that the city is there's no context within the Lorison Act that restricts setting term limits. And based on that, as long as it's voted on by the population, term limits actually can be set under the Lorison Act. So the fact that we need a whole new charter to set term limits is not necessarily a true statement. Kind of one of the other topics it talks about is the raising of taxes. So it it is true that you're allowed to raise taxes up to 7 mills on property tax under the Lorison Act, but that's not necessarily something that any council member is going to do as a first priority. It would be essentially political suicide for anybody to go in and just automatically raise taxes, and it wouldn't fit the bill of what most people are campaigning and running for. And the fact of the matter is one of the arguments that has actually been made was the reason for creating St. George is tax money was being filtered from St. George into Baton Rouge and not actually properly spent in St. George as it should be. And based on that concept, the 2% sales tax it was a transfer of a tax. We didn't increase it, we didn't reduce it. We're essentially going to be paying the same exact tax rate, which should be more than enough to cover what the obligations were. And some of the numbers that I've heard is EBR was spending about $10 million a year in services provided to St. George, to where we were contributing about 30 to 40. And I've heard other numbers, but the kind of the sticky number of what the budget was set at was 30 million. And that's kind of the number that I work with. So there would be no reason to raise a tax. There would be no justification, and as I said, that would just be absolutely ludicrous to do it. Um, and then kind of the other one is when it talks about the initiatives and referendums. So I want to read I want to read the first passage to you. So it says the electors of the city shall have the power, except as herein restricted, to propose to the city council passage or repeal of ordinance and to vote on the question if council refuses action. So that first statement is kind of talking about the ability to force the council's hand. So if you were to follow the guidelines, and we kind of talked about it a little bit yesterday, that 50% of electors in 60 days is a pretty difficult process to hit. But if you are able to do it, you can force the council's hand to have a vote on it. If they refuse to have a vote, then it would be placed on the next ballot. However, if you read the second line, it says, this power shall not extend to proposing or repealing ordinances, comma, making or reducing appropriations of money, comma, setting the compensation of city officers or employees, comma, or authorizing to repeal or reduce the reduction of the levy of any taxes. And and kind of where it gets a little bit blurry in there is that second sentence isn't necessarily clearly written to demonstrate what the actual objective is as far as what you can't do. And the inclusion of a comma after proposing or repealing ordinances actually insinuates that it's its own separate entity, that it's not necessarily tied to repealing or proposing ordinance for tax purposes, appropriation purposes, or setting compensation. And that's kind of one of those situations to where if you do end up being able to make this initiative and propose it to the council, you are going to end up with a legal battle on making the determination of, can you actually propose or repeal an ordinance, because the way it's currently written is it's separate. It doesn't necessarily include it with everything else. If the intention was to restrict it to specifically anything regarding appropriations, compensations, and taxes, it probably should have said proposing or repealing ordinances that includes, as opposed to placing a comma there to to kind of separate what it is. And as I stated, it's 60 days to get 15% of the signatures is a very difficult process. So kind of to me, it's almost a mute point. And these are three topics that have been kind of utilized. And I specifically went to the St. George, Louisiana city's Facebook page and looked at what kind of context that they're utilizing to say, hey, this is why we need a charter, and this is why we need a charter immediately. And this is part of the reason that I've kind of drawn this objection to, we don't necessarily need the charter. We need a charter that's going to be the right fit for us from day one. We don't want to enter into a new form of government that has flaws in it, that's potentially just a limited oversight that was caused because of the rush timeline. So, and based off of all of the meetings, this charter was written over the course of 7 meetings that consisted of, approximately 1 to 2 hours in length of time. And it's just not a whole lot of time to kind of go back and make a lot of discussions. And there's no reason for it. We could have waited to present a charter commission until after, and then utilize as much of that 18-month window as possible for kind of doing that. And so, that's saying all
Justin,
that.
are you okay if we move into the question and answer session in about 30 seconds?
Yeah, I was just about to hand it over to you. It was good, that's kind of wrapping up the 3 topics
Okay, no, that's
that I was
good.
planning on
Well,
talking
let's
on.
let's go ahead and transition now then.
Okay, works.
Because I do have a question. It's exactly related to what you're talking about. Kind of in the context of what we've been hearing recently about reasons why the charter should be accepted. Have you heard, or at least what I heard in the radio interview that was done, I think yesterday or perhaps Monday, that one of the reasons that why we need a city manager as proposed in the home rule charter is that because what we're looking for and what we really want, and there was a lot of emphasis made like this, that what we really want is an expert. It's an expert who's had years and lots of experience on how to run a city. And the added emphasis was made that we don't want somebody that doesn't know how to run a city to run the city. And my
Mhm.
concern is that that begs the question, what does that say about the mayor? And
Yeah.
then more specifically, what does that say about Mayor Yates? It 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 sort of seems to imply that he's not able to run the city. And that's my biggest concern regarding um the city manager. And have you heard that? Have you been picking up on that line of thinking as to
Yeah.
why that's being touted as a benefit when it doesn't seem to be?
Yeah, I've heard it actually stated several times that we don't want an all powerful mayor. We don't want a mayor that's going to come in and I've had that same exact thought, and I think I actually I mentioned that during the Rotary Club candidate forum was I don't understand what they actually hold against Dustin Yates or Jim
Right,
Morgan,
right,
depending upon who it is. But since Dustin is currently the interim mayor, and I've seen the flyer, I've seen the flyers, I've seen the posts and text that specifically states vote Team St. George, and Dustin Yates is the mayor candidate in there. So it doesn't align with with what's set up. It's either you like the candidate or you don't. I don't understand what issues they would have with Dustin Yates, and based on his experience and things like that, it's not hard to transition necessarily from a fire district chief to a mayor, and this is something that he's actually been acting in for an entire year. So,
right. Okay.
and, um even
Right, good, sir.
based
No, go ahead. Go ahead. You go ahead.
say
Finish your
based
thought.
on the argument of a city manager running it, the plan of government is still to have a contract managing service provide those services to us. And as somebody that works in lots of contracts and things of that nature, there is always a project manager that's appointed that's actually an expert in in that field of what they're doing. and and this project manager is going to be there whether we have a city manager or not. The city manager is essentially going to be just an extra layer that we're putting in there, and it's not only that we're just putting it in there, we're writing it in permanent marker. It's something that in order for us to say that we don't want a city manager anymore, we have to go back to a vote because we're writing in our form of government that this is the individual that's accountable and responsible for managing the operations, even though they're going to offload that to a contractor. And
So are you saying then that even if we get a city manager, it's still not going to negate nor dismiss having a project manager to be just as equally involved as though we didn't have a city manager?
correct. Yeah. So that contract is going to be bid on a lump sum basis. So they're going to say this is what we want you to provide. These are the services that we want. It's going to list all the streets, all the areas of grass that needs to be cut. All of those operations are going to be listed in this contract, and it's going to be bid on a lump sum, and we're going to pay a monthly fee. That's based, we'll pay 12 payments over every month. They'll get a payment for it. And within that, they're the ones providing that service. They're the ones that are responsible. We don't necessarily dictate who they hire, who they fire, and how they do it. It's more of an oversight of making sure that they're doing what they're supposed to do. So all of those responsibilities and things like that that are actually appointed to a city manager, they're going to be under that contract. So we're going to be paying for the same service essentially twice. And then if you consider the fact that we're also going to be paying a full-time mayor, we're paying it three times. So we're at that point, we're paying three times the amount of what we should be paying. And that just doesn't align with a government that's intentionally its plan is to be physically responsible. It's it's an excessive overhead, is what it is.
So let me go ahead and transition over to the next question that came in, and that has to do with financial, not transparency, but financial efficiency.
Mhm.
Uh, And this was more geared towards not the home rule charter, but about salaries. What's been your position on the salaries? And the question is basically, what have you been saying, or how do you view the salaries?
So the initial salary was kind of like a sticker shock. And when I saw the news article on it, it was one of those things that actually kind of prompted me to run. And I believe what the initial proposal was like $175,000 for the mayor, $44,000 for the council members, and I don't necessarily remember the exact number for the chief. And it was like, oh my God, this is really excessive. And then after that, I started kind of researching about it, and it's like, okay, well, the mayor's salary is probably not overly exuberant because it's somewhat in line with some other areas. It is still higher, but it is somewhat aligned. But the council at $44,000 was excessively high, and they did fortunately reduce it slightly, but I think they really missed the mark on that, especially after the fact when I did start doing the deep dive into the HRC, and it shows that the mayor's salary doesn't necessarily align with the actual responsibilities that are being provided. So based on that, it didn't align in that aspect. And even for the council members, $36,000 in my opinion is way too high. I would have probably thought somewhere around the 24 $28,000 range would be a more respectable and more comparable compensation for council members. And it's because I believe a full-time teacher right now makes about 45 $50,000 in their first year. And these are, you're talking about $36,000 for part-time council members. So and once it's set. So there's absolutely nothing we can do about those salaries. And then another kind of tidbit to it is there's an automatic 2% increase annually that's perpetual. It's going to increase 2% every year. And
Wait, what do you mean? What do you mean? Has that been built into the charter?
that's not in the charter, that's built into the ordinance. So whether the charter passes or not, the salaries are set and that 2% annual increase is set. And
Oh, wow, good.
in speaking to that, one of the arguments I heard was it's 2% is the cost of living raise. I, I've worked for several companies that my my pay didn't necessarily go up 2% automatically every year. It stayed the same for the vast majority of it, and it's we're creating this position that's becoming a financially lucrative opportunity, and I don't agree with it, and that's one of the things that it's going to be my platform to change. And like I said, there's nothing that we can do about it right now. The Louisiana Constitution mandates that you have to accept it and you can't reduce it in term. However, it doesn't say I can't donate it back to charities. So my intentions is to utilize not necessarily all, but a large portion of it. I don't necessarily know an exact number, but it's going to be probably around that 10 to 15,000 per year that I want to donate back to into the community of St. George, into organizations that are actually doing work in St. George. And some of the ideas are donating to Keep Tigertown Beautiful, because they do a lot of work as far as picking up trash and things like that. And I want to make sure that we're able to provide a little bit of assistance in that manner. Another one is, as you may be able to tell, but my family's very big, very big dog people, and my wife actually runs a nonprofit dog rescue. So I want to be able to contribute towards spay and neuters or medical assistance to families that aren't able to provide that care because of hard times. And it's something that we actually do with our organization on a regular basis. But providing this money, that it belongs, in my opinion, it belongs to the community, and providing it to these organizations to help to help boost them. And it's one of those situations to where, if even though I don't agree with it, it's an opportunity for me to be able to make a difference in the community directly.
Well, that's great, Justin. We don't have any other questions for the Q&A segment. So are you okay if we go ahead and go to open mic? And if there
Mhm.
aren't any conversations, we may just have a shorter segment today. But you can
Okay.
add on, as we normally do, you have closing statements, and then you can expand anything that you want to talk about.
Okay.
So let's go ahead and ask if any of you would like to open your mic and ask questions and have a conversation with Justin. You're welcome to. If you're going to challenge, the only thing we would ask is, well, actually two things. One, you definitely be civil, and then up front, if you're going to challenge, just let them know. Hey, Justin, I want to challenge you on something, and go ahead and
Okay.
let them know that you're about to make the challenge. Other than that, have a conversation with Justin. If anybody wants to do that, go ahead and indicate that in the Q&A section, or within the actions menu, click on it, raising your hand, and we'll let you in. So we'll give everybody just a couple seconds to signify.
Okay.
All right, we're not seeing anybody. So microphone back to you, the floor back to you, Justin. Any
Okay.
other thoughts or any expansion in any other topics?
Yeah, and just kind of closing on it. We've been my wife and I have been walking through neighborhoods, talking to kind of as many residents as we can, and the almost unanimous consensus is that the population doesn't want the HRC. So, kind of with that, it is my belief that the HRC is not going to pass, and we're going to move forward in a Lorison Act form of government, and I think that's a form of government that we can utilize to our benefit until we are able to write a charter that's going to be properly fit for what we are and what we want to do and where we want to go. So, kind of with that, I appreciate everybody's time, and thank y'all for joining. And you can join us again tomorrow night at 8:30, same time, and hopefully tomorrow we'll have the YouTube channel streaming as well. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Justin. Have a good night. Good night, everybody.
All right, thank y'all.